Hey guys, it's Lucian, and today I am going to be filming my October and November wrap-up. I know I said in the beginning of the year that I would not combine months into one wrap-up, but things just got kind of crazy for me in November, and I didn't have time to film an October wrap-up, and by the time that I did, it would be too late, so I just decided to combine the 2 months. So this is going to be a really long video, but what else is new for me? I'm going to try to keep my synopses as short as possible. But let's just get into it. The first book that I read in October was Steelstriker by LaRue. This is the sequel to Skyhunter, which I read earlier this year and really enjoyed. It follows a girl named Talon who is part of an elite band of warriors who are tasked to defend their country, which is the last free country on this continent, which has been taken over by something called the Caraval Federation. So I enjoyed this sequel. I ended up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I definitely did not like it as much as Skyhunter, but I do think it was pretty solid. Like, I don't really have anything against this book. I think that I liked the characters as I did in the first book. LaRue definitely knows how to write characters, and in this book we don't only get Talon's POV, we also get Red, who is, you know, kind of the second main character in the series. And I really liked how she is able to distinguish between their voices. I think she's always really good at that, so I definitely enjoyed that aspect of the story. But the plot kind of fell a little bit flat for me. I think the first 200 pages were really slow, and it just felt very typical dystopian to me. There was also like a game competition aspect of this book, which felt really random because by the end it just kind of fell by the wayside, and it felt like almost like an afterthought, so I didn't even know why it was included in the first place. But after page 200, so like the second half of the book, I was pretty hooked, and I did read it pretty quickly, so I think that is a good thing. You know, the writing was obviously really good, it's LaRue, and I think the world building, while it did get a little too global in this book, I do feel like LaRue bit off a little bit more than she could chew with this installment. I do think that it wrapped it up pretty well, and I loved the ending of this book. I think it was a great way to wrap up the duology, and I really like duologies because you kind of get everything in just 2 books, so there's not like a ton of waiting between installments. So I liked this book, not as much as the first book, but it was still pretty solid. Then I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is the UK special edition. This follows a girl named Evangeline Fox who wants to stop a wedding because the love of her life is marrying her stepsister, I think it was. I honestly don't remember. But she ends up going to Jax, who is the Prince of Hearts, and asks for him to do this for her, and all he asks for in return is 3 kisses, but after the first one, she kind of realizes that she is not getting what she bargained for, or she bargained for too much. I don't know. So, as you can tell from the kind of flippant way I am discussing this synopsis, I did not really like this book. I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. I'm really disappointed because I bought this UK special edition. I thought it was so beautiful. It really is. Like, it has a lot going for it. It has this underneath. Like, it was just really beautiful. So I paid extra for this. I paid for like UK shipping. So I was really excited for this book, and I really liked the Caraval Series by Stephanie Garber, but this just fell so flat for me. I did not like the plot of this book. It was really just revolving around this stupid girl who like wants to fall in love. Like, that is not enough of a plot for me to be engaged, and I just was not a big fan of it. And I think the writing was really sloppy, which was so surprising because I really liked the writing in the Caraval series, but here it was just so boring and bland. I don't think the characters were interesting at all. Jax, I didn't really like him in the Caraval series, but in this he felt like he got even less character development, which doesn't make any sense. And I feel like Evangeline was so boring, she felt so cookie cutter, and she had like no personality. And I don't think the world was engaging. Random things would just happen for no reason, and there was no explanation. And the like one bit that I liked about this book, we didn't even like get much in this, and we're probably gonna get it in the sequel, so I kind of want to read that when it comes out. But yeah, this first installment was not for me. I did not really like it, and it is definitely going to be probably on my least favorite books of the year list, just because it was so disappointing. But you know, it has a nice cover, so that's at least something that it has going for it. After that, I picked up The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding by Alexandra Bracken. I'd been meaning to read this book for a really long time, and I felt like October was a good time This is a middle grade story that follows a boy named Prosper Redding, who is part of this very, very rich family. Like, they have this whole estate in Massachusetts, and he basically ends up finding out that one of his ancestors made a deal with a demon. They're called fiends in this book, and he never ended up fulfilling his part of the bargain, and now the fiend has come and possessed Prosper, and he kind of has to deal with that, and things kind of go from there. So this book doesn't have too much of a plot. Alexandra Bracken is not really known for her, like, super shocking, exciting plots. She definitely does slower books. But I think, you know, since it was a middle grade book, she didn't go... It wasn't, like, too long. Like, I feel like some of her books they kind of belabor things a lot, but this one was not really that bad. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely liked it. I liked the characters probably the most. I think the plot was a little bit weak. It just didn't really have much going for it, like, the plot-wise. Like, I just felt like it was kind of just, like, going through the lives of these characters, and specifically Prosper, and it didn't really have much direction. So that was one thing that I didn't really love about this book, but I think the characters were good, the writing was obviously really good, and I did like the kind of spooky aspects of the story, and I did like getting the perspective of Alistair, who's the fiend that is possessing Prosper. I think that was interesting. I could have used a little bit more of it, but I think overall it was a pretty good read, and I would definitely recommend it for, like, a spooky time of year. Then I picked up A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This is a YA mystery book that follows the descendants of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, but it is kind of gender-bent, so we have Charlotte Holmes and Jamie Watson. Jamie is a boy, though, but Charlotte is obviously a girl. And basically they go to this prep school in Connecticut, I think, and I don't know, it's been so long since I read some of these books. And there is a murder, and they kind of get implicated in it. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I had been hyping it up in my head for a really, really long time because I thought I would really, really like it. It reminded me a lot of Truly Devious, just in the synopsis, and I thought I would love it. I thought it was honestly really boring. Like, I thought it was kind of slow, and the mystery was just not as engaging for me as I feel like it could have been. And I do think that the character work in here was really good, but I think I could have used a little bit more plot. Like, when I go into a mystery book, I do expect a lot of plot. I'm fine if I go into, like, a fantasy book or a contemporary or a historical where it's mostly about the characters, but I think if I go into a mystery book, I'm expecting, like, you know, some excitement. This was pretty short, so it was easy to read, but I do wish we had just gotten a little bit more of the mystery. Like, I don't even remember who the culprit was. I don't even remember who died. So I feel like that is kind of not a good indication that this is a great mystery. Like, I think it was constructed fine, but I don't think it, like, took the I don't think it was in the forefront of the story like it should have been. So, while the characters were really good and the writing was pretty good, I just wasn't a big fan of the actual plot. But I will probably read the sequels because I do own books 2 and 3, and I feel like those might, since we have laid the groundwork for the characters, those might be a little bit more mystery-focused. After that, I read Macbeth by William Shakespeare. I read this for school, so I'm not going to go into it. You all know what Macbeth is. I enjoyed this play. I thought it was good, but I didn't give it a star rating because I just didn't feel like it. Anyway, moving on, the next book that I read was the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling, aka Rachel Hawkins. This book follows a woman named Vivi who ends up breaking up with this guy and then accidentally cursing him, and then he comes back to the town that she lives in and things start going awry. I had looked forward to this book so much. I thought I would love it, and I did not. I thought this was honestly just really dry. Like, first of all, I'm not a fan of romances that are told in third person. I feel like it just never works. Like, I can't think of a book that I've read in third person that's a romance book that I, liked. I just feel like romance books, you're supposed to connect to the characters, and I just never felt like I was connected to the characters. I always just felt, like, so at arm's length with the story, which was so disappointing because I really had been looking forward to it. I think, you know, Vivi and Reese, who are the two main characters, were well developed, but I don't think that their romance, like, I never felt like they needed to be together. I don't think that the plot was too interesting. Like, I was just kind of bored throughout reading the book, and it's not even that long. It's, like, it's just over 300 pages, but it felt like it took forever for me to get through. So I just wasn't a big fan of the story. I think the romance was fine, like it was readable, but I just was a little bit disappointed with this book as a whole. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. I would still recommend it for like Halloween for like a certain people, but I don't think it was like that amazing. Will I read more of Rachel Hawkins' romance books? Yes, but I think that I was expecting this to be like as good as her Prince Charming series, which it was not. Then I did a reread of one of my absolute favorite books of all time, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by B.E. Schwab. I obviously gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This follows a woman named, I almost said B.E. Schwab. This follows a woman named Addie LaRue who lives in France in the early 1700s, and she feels like time is fleeting, and she ends up making a bargain with a kind of shadow creature. She wants to live forever, but he says that, you know, that deal really has nothing in for him, and so she agrees to give him her soul when she doesn't want it anymore, and so he gives her the gift of immortality after striking this bargain, but he ends up cursing her to be forgotten by everyone she meets. So it kind of goes through 300 years of her life up until about 2014 in New York City when she meets a boy who remembers her name. So this is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I absolutely love the story. I think the writing is V.E. Schwab at her absolute best. This is my favorite one of her books, and I just love this book. I feel like it will become a yearly reread for me, and I just absolutely adore this story. And I read it last year when I was on like a family trip with my family in upstate New York, and I did it again this time on the same trip, same hotel, everything, and I feel like it's just gonna become a tradition now. So yeah, I absolutely love this story. I can't even talk like coherently about it. I just think it is amazing. Like, I feel like that's just the bottom line. It's amazing, and I would recommend it to absolutely everyone. Then I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This book follows a girl named Elle who goes to this school that is deadly. Basically, there are all these monsters that try to eat you and stuff, and it's crazy. She's basically trying to like survive in this deadly school. It was pitched as like a dark version of Harry Potter. I liked this book. I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think I definitely enjoyed it more while I was reading it than I have like in retrospect. Like, I don't think it was that amazing. Like, I think it was kind of just okay. I don't even know if I'm going to continue on with the series. It was honestly just pretty boring to me. And I thought I'd be one of the few people who actually enjoyed it, but it was kind of just bland. Like, I think the world building was really sloppy. It was just given to you right in front of you, and then there was just no nuance to anything. The main character, Elle, was so annoying and mean, and I don't think Orion was even that great of a character. The world was interesting, but I don't think it was presented in an interesting way. And yeah, I feel like the concept was cool, but it was not crafted with a deft hand. So that is my main complaint with the story. So yeah, gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. I don't know if I would even recommend it, but I mean, I guess if you like really like info dumpy adult fantasy, you might like this. Then I read A Tale of Sorcery by Chris Colford. This is the third and final book in the Tale of Magic series, which is a spin-off series. It's a prequel to The Land of Stories, which is one of my all-time favorite kids series. I went into this with really low expectations because I liked the first book. I did not like the second book, but I ended up really liking this book in the end. I thought it was a good conclusion. I liked the way that all the characters kind of came together in the end, and I did like the overall plot of this book. I think my main problem with book 2 was that it didn't have a plot, and then by the end, it wasn't even resolved. And so I feel like it was resolved in this book, and I do like the new stuff that was introduced in this. I do think the writing is still a little bit juvenile, and it's not that great. I'm kind of scared to ever reread the Land of Story series because I feel like I will not enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid, but, you know, this is still a pretty solid middle grade series. I would recommend it, but I think you kind of just have to, like, trudge through that second book. But this was overall pretty good, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I can't really talk about it because, you know, it's the finale and it's the third book, but I did enjoy it, and I liked the plot, and I liked the way that the characters ended up, and I would be satisfied if this was the finale. I'm pretty sure he is going to write more books in this series, but, like, it was kind of, this was written as a finale, but there might be more. I'd be totally satisfied with this being the end, but, you know, I think maybe like a short story linking this in the line of stories a little bit more would have been good, but, or like a few extra chapters, but I'm pretty satisfied with this, so. And then I did my yearly reread of Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is a graphic novel that follows two main characters, Deja and Josiah, who work at this pumpkin patch every year, every October, and then this is their last night because they are both going to college, and this is like, you know, it's their last night at the pumpkin patch, and they kind of want to do everything that they always promised each other and themselves that they would do. And I love this graphic novel. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's just really, really fun. I love the artwork in this story. I think it's just so good. And yeah, I am just a really big fan. And like, it's just so cool. Like, I want to go to this pumpkin patch. It's so cool. And I really, really enjoy this graphic novel. So definitely pick it up if you haven't. So that was it for all the books that I read in October. Moving on to the books that I read in November, the first book that I read was The Excalibur Curse by Kirsten White. This is the third and final book in the Camelot Rising trilogy. The first book was The Guinevere Deception, and the second book was The Camelot Betrayal. I really, really like those first two books. I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. I love Camelot stories, and I really like Kirsten White's books, and I think she did a really, really great job with those first two books. I did really like The Excalibur Curse. I ended up giving it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I think in the end this is definitely my least favorite book in the series. I didn't like how we were away from Camelot for most of the story. It just didn't feel as magical as the rest of the books in the series, and I think that it was kind of just, it just felt a little bit flat to me, and I do think there were a lot of questions that were brought up in the first 2 installments that were answered in this book, but I just wasn't a big fan of how they were wrapped up. I do still really, really like the characters in this series, and Kirsten White's writing is obviously really, really immersive, and I love it, but I think it was just kind of okay. Like, I don't really feel anything towards this book. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the first 2. I do think it was a pretty good series overall, but again, I feel like this third book did fall a little bit flat, and I feel like it almost could have been a duology, but you know, that's kind of my thoughts on this book. It was good. I didn't love it, but I do think that it was overall like a pretty good finale, and I liked how it wrapped some things up, but you know, it wasn't my favorite book, so that's that. Next, I reread the entire Caraval series by Stephanie Gerber. I had kind of an identity crisis after reading Once Upon a Broken Heart, where I was like, do I not like the Caraval series anymore? Do I not like any of my favorite series anymore? But I decided to reread these, and I think Once Upon a Broken Heart is just an outlier. I really, really love these books. I know they get a lot of hate on BookTube, and I don't understand why. I think they're really good. I mean, they're not amazing, but I think that they are pretty solid, and I guess I'm going to talk about them individually. Caraval, this is definitely my least favorite book in the series. I think that you can tell it was a debut, and Stephanie Gerber was still kind of like finding her footing, but I do think that this was a pretty solid first book. I think Legendary, many people would agree with me that this is the best book in the series. I really like how we kind of got such a different view on the world, and I think Stephanie Gerber brought up her writing a lot. I think it just improved so much within just, you know, one book. So I really, really liked this one. And then Finale was originally my least favorite book in the series when I first read it last year, but I think that I grew a greater appreciation for the story when I reread it this year. And I just really liked it. I think it was a good way to wrap up the story. I do dislike how unbalanced the POVs are. Like, Tella definitely gets way more chapters from her perspective than Scarlet does, and I do wish that was not the case. I wish they were just alternating, because you'll get like 6 chapters from Tella's point of view, and then 2 from Scarlet, and then 5 from Tella, and then 1 from Scarlet. That's like 2 pages long, and I just didn't really like that. I wish it was more balanced. But, you know, this was a pretty good conclusion, and I do really, really like this series overall, and I think you should pick it up. Then I read Three Sisters, Three Queens by Philippa Gregory. This is a book that I've been meaning to get to for so long. I bought it back in like 2017. This is a historical fiction novel that follows Margaret Tudor from the time that she was like about 12 years old, I think, up until, you know, her later years in life, and it also follows the dynamic she has with her two sisters, one being Mary Tudor, who is, her direct sister, and Catherine of Aragon, who is her sister-in-law, because she married two of Margaret's brothers, actually. So I really, really enjoyed this story. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I know a lot of people complained about this book because from the title and the synopsis, it seems like it would be told from Catherine, Margaret, and Mary's perspectives, while it's only told from Margaret. I can see how that would be annoying, but I knew going into this that it was only told from Margaret's point of view, so it didn't irk me as much as it did other readers. I think for what this story was, it was really, really great. Like, for the story that we were actually presented in this book, I really, really, really liked it. But I can definitely see how the story would have really improved from having, in addition to Margaret, Mary, and Catherine's POVs. I think it would have added another layer of complexity to the story because you would have gotten all of the kind of views on what was happening, but I can understand how it might have been a purposeful choice by Philippa Gregory to only include Margaret, because it's like the point you want to feel like completely immersed in her perspective and in her mindset. So I can definitely see how that was purposeful. And then another complaint about this book was how annoying Margaret is. I do agree that she could be kind of bothersome, and she is very, very fickle. Like, she will hate her sister 1 second, but then and she'll I hope something bad happens to her, and then something bad will happen to her, and she's in the church praying for her, and I'm like, girl, pick a side. I don't understand what you're doing. Can you just stop being so, she literally was I was getting whiplash because she was switching at such breakneck speeds. I think Philippa Gregory's writing is really good. It's very immersive. She definitely paints a picture, and I really like the way that she is able to really make you empathize with a character just from small things that she says here and there. Also, I mean, the plot was not too exciting, but this book is 550 pages, and I was never bored. I was always really, really engaged, and I always wanted to keep reading, and I think that it was just, that's really hard to do. So the middle was a bit dry, but I think the beginning and the first 200 pages and the last 200 pages were really, really great. I think the middle was a bit boring and could have been cut down a little bit, but I did still enjoy it overall, and I think the setting was really great. I love Scotland, and I just love the snowy, I love snowy settings, and a lot of this book is set when it's winter time or becoming winter, and it's obviously set in Scotland because Margaret becomes the Queen of Scotland. Oh, also, I forgot to mention that. Basically, it's called Three Sisters, Three Queens because it's Margaret, Mary, and Catherine. Catherine becomes the Queen of England, Mary becomes Queen of France, and Margaret becomes Queen of Scotland. I forgot to mention that part, but yeah, overall, I really, really liked this story. I think it was a good exploration of sisterhood, and I will definitely be picking up more of Philippa Gregory's works. Oh, actually, sorry, before I move on, I will say that the ending of this book was a bit abrupt. It kind of just stopped, the story was just over. And I would have liked to get up until the very end of Margaret's life. We do end this 10 years, I think, before her death, which I feel robbed us of a little bit of story. It felt like Philippa Gregory was just tired of writing the book, and so she was I'm just gonna end it here, and you guys can, Wikipedia, Google what happens later. Sorry, my memory card cut off, or was full, and I had to import footage and delete stuff, but I'm back. Anyway, what I was saying was, apart from those two little qualms that I had, or a couple little issues, I still really, really liked this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over again. But, yeah. Definitely going to pick up more of Philippa Gregory's books, and I'm excited to get to them because I really, really love the Tudor era and this part of history. Then I reread the entire Shatter Me series by Taha Mafi. These are just the 6 main books, but I also read the novellas as well. So I read Shatter Me, Destroy Me, Unravel Me, Fracture Me, Ignite Me, Restore Me, Shadow Me, Defy Me, Reveal Me, and Imagine Me. I reread all of those. All the main books I've now read 5 times, and I think I've read all the novellas 3 times. As I'm sure you know, this is one of my favorite series of all time. I didn't just reread it for fun, though it was kind of fun. I reread them in preparation for Believe Me, which is the new novella that came out, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but I do just want to run through the books really quickly. So Shatter Me, this was probably my least favorite reread. I ended up lowering my rating to a 4.5 just because I do think this is one of the weaker books in the series. I don't know what my tripod is doing right now. It's probably going to fall over, which would be so fun. But anyway, I ended up lowering my rating for this one just a little bit because, again, I think compared to a lot of the rest of the books in the series, this is one of the weaker ones. So I used to really love this book, but I think just objectively, it's not the best in the series. Then Destroy Me. This is probably my favorite reread of this novella. I think it's one of the best novellas out there, and yeah, I'm just a really big fan of it. Unravel Me is still my favorite book in the series. There are just so many scenes that I love in this book, and it's just one of the best. Like, I think it's just one of the best middle books, I guess, or, you know, I guess it's a middle book. In series, I think it's the longest one in the series as well. Like, it's just has so much packed into it, and I just love it. All of the scenes in this book are like A+. Fracture Me was still as annoying as ever. Adam is just in his own world. But then we have Ignite Me. I do really, really love this one. This is my second favorite in the series. I think, again, there are just so many scenes in this book that, as I'm talking about it, I'm just like, my head is flashing back to. I just love it so much, and I think it was a really great, like, conclusion, I guess, but I do understand why Tokunomafi went back and wrote new books, and that brings me to Restore Me. I still really love this book. I think it's definitely a 5-star. I think the way that it set up so many things was so good, and the way that it like picked up off of where Ignite Me ended and then set up all this mystery for like the next books, I think was really great. It is kind of annoying though how short these books are because of like all the chapter switches. Like there's like this like 3 pages when we switch POVs, so that's a little annoying, and it definitely makes the book seem longer. Like they look longer than they are. Like this book is 430 something pages, but in reality it's only like 320, so that is a little bit frustrating. But I do really love Restore Me. Shadow Me I think is still like a good 3-star novella. Define Me, I ended up lowering my rating for this one as well. I gave it like a 3.5. I think this is easily just the worst book in the series. There are a lot of things in this book that like they're picked up from Restore Me, but they're not done well. This reads almost like a second draft. Like there are a lot of scenes in this book that fall really flat. There are a lot of scenes that I wish we could add, and I feel like my main issue with this book is this. I wish that we could have we could have Shadow Me and whatever, but I feel like we have Kenji's POV in this book, right? And it just ends, like, in the middle. Like, we just stop getting Kenji's POV at, like, page 170 or something. And I don't understand why, and I feel like we should have gotten his POV again, like, throughout the book, which would have made this longer. And I feel like we also should have gotten Reveal Me at the end of this book, and also included Juliet and Laura's perspective, like, interwoven throughout it, just so that this book is more consistent. And then we still could have gotten a novella between this and Imagine Me, but it would have been, like, from another character's perspective that wasn't Kenji, because I feel like this book ends in a way where, like, it would not propel you, like, unless you're a huge fan of the series, this would not propel you to, like, read the final book, because it ends on a good note, there's no cliffhanger, but Reveal Me has a cliffhanger, so it's just this whole thing. Anyway, speaking of Reveal Me, that one's still a 2-star novella. Not a fan. I think it's really pointless, especially since nothing happens in it, but anyway. And then we get to Imagine Me, which I still love. I still give this 5 stars. I think it did a lot of things really well. There were a lot of things that were like, we wanted from Ignite Me that we didn't get, that I felt like we got in this book. And yeah, I really, really love this series still, and I'm really happy I reread it, because this was, for like, Ignite Me and Unravel Me and Restore Me and Imagine Me, I feel like those were some of my favorite rereads that I've done, and I definitely appreciated some of the novellas a little bit more. Anyway, speaking of novellas, let's talk about Believe Me, which is the whole reason why I reread all these books in the first place. So this book takes place after the events of Imagine Me, and the like epilogue that we get in Imagine Me is actually in. It's the first 2 chapters of Believe Me. So yeah, and then we get I can't talk about it at all because it spoils everything, but I did really like this book. I ended up giving it like a 3 out of 5 stars. I think that it was fine. I did like that we got more, because again, there were just a lot of things left at the end of Imagine Me that were not resolved, so I think this was a good addition to the series to just kind of tie up some loose ends. I do wish we got a little bit more of like seeing how the world is being repaired, but you know, it was good to see inside Warner's head one final time. I do wish this was told from his and Juliet's perspective, because I just feel like it would have added a lot more to the story, and I almost wish that this had been added to the end of Imagine Me and cut down a little bit more, because there were some chapters that were just like boring and had no point. So I feel like if it had been cut down a little bit and put into the end of Imagine Me, and maybe included and definitely included Juliet's perspective and maybe Kenji, it just would have been a lot better. But I do think this was still good. I liked seeing the characters one final time, and I'm happy with this being their conclusion. We don't need any more Takamafi, please let them be. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this book, and again, it was fun to just get one final hurrah for the series. And then the final book that I read in November was Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is one of my new favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is... I don't know how I'm going to explain this. Basically, it starts where we find out that Aphrodite, who is the Greek goddess of love, we find out that she is on trial, you know, she's like put on trial by her husband because she had an affair with Ares, who is the god of war. And to kind of prove her case and prove why she's innocent, she decides to tell the story of 4 different people, 2 different couples, during World War I, to prove why love and war are eternally attracted to one another. So we have Hazel and James, who kind of get together, and then James ends up going off to war. And then we have Aubrey and Colette. Aubrey is a piano player, and Colette is a chanteuse. She's a Belgian chanteuse, and they end up falling in love as well, but then some stuff happens with them where they get split apart as well, and it kind of just shows how love and war are always connected and interwoven, and how, you know, and we also get, so we get Aphrodite's perspective on these 2 couples, and we also get Ares and Apollo and all these different people who kind of come in to tell the story of Hazel and James and Colette and Aubrey and all 4 of them together as well. So I absolutely loved this book. I think the writing was so beautiful. Julie Berry just like wraps you in. Like, I just felt so... Every time I was reading this book, I just felt like I was sinking into the story. I absolutely loved it. I think that all of the characters were so well written. I think they were just, like, she did so much research because Aubrey is actually black, and so she did so much research into what it was like for a black soldier in World War I, and I just loved all of that. She explored sexism and obviously like the war stuff and racism, and it was just, she explored so much in, you know, just one book that I think, you know, it deserves 5 stars. And I think the way that the couples were written, it was like, I think there's just something about reading a love story set during such a tumultuous, tenuous time like war, where time is fleeting and there's just a limited amount of time, and it makes every moment more impactful. And there are just some simple things that the characters do, like go on a date or like kiss in front of the Eiffel Tower or go to dinner, that just has so much more weight because you know the severity of the like world and the context that everything is in, and it just makes everything so much better. And I cannot wait to reread this book. I read it on ebook, and I asked for a physical copy for Christmas, so hopefully I get it, and I can just reread it, because I feel like I just need to absorb this story a second time. I feel like the first time was just not as much, it was just not enough, so I absolutely love this book. You have to read it. It is just perfect. It's so good. One of the best historical fiction books I've read, and I don't really like historical fiction books set during war times, but I think since this is World War I, it has a different spin. Like most war historical fictions are set during World War II, but since this is set during the first one, it is kind of just, there's just more ingenuity with it and more originality. So I loved this book. I can't wait to read more of Julie Berry's works, and I hope she writes another book similar to this one. So that is it for my October and November wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd love to know the books you read in October and November, and yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. All my social media links are in the description box below. I will also have timestamps in the description box if you want to just like come back to this video and jump back to see a specific book or anything. So yeah, that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!